An evil mass shooting where 11 were shot, 4 were killed, but it's more than just the shooter who might be going to prison for decades. What is going on here, and how could this play out in the future to be weaponized against the Second Amendment? My name's Tom Grieve. Let's get into it. November 30th, 2021, at Oxford High School, there was a mass shooting in the state of Michigan. But that's not exactly the reason why we're here, or at least that's not all of the reason why we're here and what we're talking about. What we're talking about is the fact that the mother of the shooter was just convicted of 4 counts of involuntary manslaughter. That's right. The mom who was not at the scene, did not pull the trigger, she's the one that's now going to be going to prison and perhaps soon to be joined by her husband, the father of the shooter as well, who stands trial in early March of 2024. What's going on here? And I want to dive into this and raise some questions and to throw it out to you about how this could become enormously weaponized against the firearm industry, retailers, distributors, manufacturers, you name it. But first, we need to cover some of the facts before we get to those points of analysis and those kind of questions. So what we're dealing with here is an individual, a young man who is 15 years old. And I know his name, but I'm not going to be naming him. Deal with it. To say the least, he had severe mental health problems. When I say severe, let me put some context on this because that's going to be important to understand where we're going. So shortly after the shooting in 2021, there was, of course, an investigation that was launched. Quickly it became evident that there were some things that were going on here that maybe were not right. Whether it borders on being criminal, that's going to be the question I'm going to be throwing to you at the end. So the shooter was looking at searches on the internet for things like psychopath, sociopath, wanting to kill, narcissism, insanity, obsessive compulsive disorder, and paranoia. There were also texts that emerged between the shooter as well as his mother several months before the shooting, where he was reporting to his mother that he could hear the toilet flushing and doors slam and saw a light turn on and off, and clothes were flying off the shelves, but this all only happened when he was alone at home. Quote, "This stuff only happens when I'm home alone," end quote, he texted his mom, receiving no response. He also had text messages shared with a friend of the shooter where he wrote about seeing ghosts and other hallucinations. He was experiencing extreme paranoia and feelings of hopelessness. And his parents apparently, at least according to him, refused his pleas for mental health treatment. Quote from one of his text messages, "I asked my dad to take me to a doctor, but he just gave me some pills and told me to suck it up. My mom laughed when I told her," end quote. The shooter also told his friend that he was suffering, quote, "mentally and physically," end quote, and did not feel safe anymore. He was thinking about calling 911 himself as one of his plans, but unfortunately he never followed through. Quote, "I need help, but my parents would be really pissed," end quote. Okay, so how did the parents react to all this? Well, they reacted by buying the 15-year-old with the disturbing hallucinations and searches for killing people, all that kind of stuff, by purchasing a handgun for him. Well, maybe not exactly that. The shooter alleged in court during his plea colloquy, so that's when he pled guilty to his offenses, more on that in a bit, that he actually gave his dad the money for the gun and selected out which one he wanted him to buy. Then his dad went to the store and basically conducted what sounds like a straw purchase. Again, that's just me taking a look at what I have before me. Then the parents got the call from the school on November 30th of 2021. Notice that's the same day of the shooting, reporting that their son made a highly disturbing and unusual drawing. Both of the parents came to a meeting that same day, a little over an hour later at about 10 a.m., where the school gave them an ultimatum to get their kid into counseling within 48 hours. School officials said that the parents, quote, resisted the idea of, name of the child, leaving the school at that time, end quote. What was the drawing that they blew off? Was this something that was harmless? Well, you can see it on the screen. And by the way, at the time of the meeting, this had been altered. So what you're seeing was the original that a teacher saw, and that's what precipitated the meeting. Next, shortly, you'll be seeing what the parents would have seen. But here's what was written on the drawing for those of you riding your lawnmower, driving your car. Hopefully you're not looking at this right now. In the first one, there's a drawing of a handgun and the words, quote, "The thoughts won't stop. Help me," end quote. There's what officials believed to be a drawing of a shooting victim who's bleeding out. To the right of that image is a bullet with the phrase, quote, "blood everywhere," end quote. Below that is a laughing, crying emoji of some type with the words, quote, "My life is useless," end quote, and, quote, "The world is dead," end quote. Now, the updated version, now on your screen, is the ones that the parents would have seen and had been cleaned up somewhat by the soon-to-be shooter. Some of the new phrases now included "video game this is" and "harmless act." There's also the phrase, "I love my life so much," and next to that, an OHS rocks, which presumably is a reference to the name of the high school, Oxford High School. Quote, "The world is dead," end quote phrase had been scratched out, and next to it was a quote of "We're all friends here," end quote. Guys, really quickly, if you've made it this far in the video, show your support for the Second Amendment, the Bill of Rights, the Constitution, and of course, this channel. Hit that like button. It's absolutely free. Takes you just a quick moment. It tells the YouTube algorithm, hey, this channel and this video should be out there more, and it tells me you like seeing content like this. You want me to follow up on stories like this. Don't forget, of course, to join the always fun and sometimes raucous discussion in the comment field, and back to the video. During this meeting, the 15-year-old had been removed from class and was actually sitting nearby outside of the school with his backpack. Now, of course, if only anyone had bothered to check the backpack, and to be clear, I'm not throwing stones with that, I'm just saying, what if? Within hours, the act of evil had transpired and lives were forever lost and changed as a result of him not being taken home, him having access to the firearm, his dad allegedly straw purchasing that handgun for him, and a lot of ignorance soon turning to blame and loss. And here we are. The shooter ultimately pled guilty to 1 count of terrorism causing death, as well as 4 counts of murder and 19 other charges. He was sentenced last year in 2023 to life in prison with no chance of parole. He's now 17. However, as I mentioned before, his mother has now been found guilty of 4 counts of involuntary manslaughter, each count, I believe, carrying with it a 15-year possible maximum prison sentence, and of course, other charges as well. And as I already mentioned before, his father's trial is set to begin in early March of 2024. So what does this all mean? For decades, there have been attempts to weaponize the courts to connect the actions of a shooter to people who came into contact with that firearm, the one that was used, whether that's a different buyer who gave it to them as a gift or sold it to them later, perhaps a retail store, or distributors, or even manufacturers. The idea here has been that where the anti-gun crowd cannot win victories at the ballot box, perhaps they can win them through the jury box. Those attempts have taken numerous different forms, and I do mean numerous. Civil lawsuits brought by a combination of government entities and personal injury attorneys. If you want more details, I have an upcoming video where I document the whole history of this, or at least the recent history of this, where there was a mass coordination between public officials, private attorneys, you name it, designed to bring the gun industry to its knees. And you know what? It almost worked. They knocked out several major companies. They brought some big names like Smith & Wesson to their knees. And by rumor, don't know if this is true, supposedly Glock was close to folding as well. So be sure to hit subscribe if you don't want to miss that video. It's going to be coming out soon. Here's my perhaps obvious concern with all of this. With a precedent-setting criminal conviction against at least the mom and perhaps soon the father, where will this expansion of liability go to? Where will it end? I promise you, as you watch this, there are anti-gun people working on ways to bridge the now shrinking gap between this criminal conviction of the parents, or at least of the mom, and firearm retailers, distributors, and finally the prize, manufacturers. After all, no firearms to purchase, nowhere to purchase it from, no Second Amendment. We got to remember, guys, we can talk about the principles behind First Amendment, Second Amendment, you name it, but fundamentally all rights truly come down to property rights. We can enunciate everything that you can about the importance of having the ability to protect yourself. The Second Amendment, let's say. If you don't have the tools to do that with, is that right alive or dead? Same thing for the First Amendment. We can talk about principles of, well, you have a freedom to speech, freedom to press, all that kind of stuff. But if you don't have freedom to assemble and to transmit those ideas, to record those ideas, and to have others view and hear them, that's all based on property rights. Whether that's parchments and liberty pole going back to centuries before, books, of course, more recently, and of course, right now, you're watching it, things like YouTube and other social media platforms, and of course, the internet writ large. All of our rights fundamentally come down to property rights. Anything that is attacking property rights is either a direct weaponization against rights or a potential weaponization against rights. And I'm not being doom and gloom about that. I'm simply following the march of history. It is also important to point out that this is a criminal conviction. Virtually all of the lawsuits that I mentioned earlier were all civil. But now we've jumped from civil court into criminal court. This is a massive change. We have only really seen the weaponization of civil courts, but is this now going to turn into criminal courts next? When will a smug prosecutor who's eyeing higher office decide to roll the dice with their anti-gun jury pool and make a play for national headlines by indicting a gun store or a major firearms manufacturer off of some political theory of liability? Could it happen? With these convictions in place, I think that now it's not so much of a leap to be thinking about that. Let's be clear though, this case truly does seem like an extreme example. And the optimist in me wants to say that this is a one-off example of horrific parenting and ignoring clear and obvious warning signs. This seems like a good time, by the way, to me just to drop in here that if you or someone you know are ever in a state of mental health crisis, you can always hit 988 on your phone. You can also text that number for a mental health crisis hotline for immediate help. Be sure to write that down. Be sure to have it handy in case someone that you know, maybe yourself, needs it. But the prosecutors deliberately chose to prosecute the parents for a form of homicide. Thus, we have novel legal precedent and a new door opened. Now, I'm not saying that the justice demanded anything less in this case. I'm also not prophesizing that we're going to be launched into this new era of criminal charges against people who never wielded a weapon at the scene of a crime, such as gun store owners, such as distributors, such as manufacturers. You be the judge of that. All I'm saying is that the legal landscape, it just changed a bit. How much or how little? Well, that's now going to be in the hands of prosecutors, judges, and juries across the country. Now to our quote of the day. This one comes from noted Greek philosopher Plato. You should not honor men more than truth. We appreciate you sticking with us. If you've made it this far, don't forget to hit that like button. It does tremendous things for our channel and includes letting me know what you'd like to see. I'll look forward to joining you in the discussion in the comments section below, and I'll see you in the next one. Thanks for sticking around to the end of the video. If you enjoyed this one, please feel free to check out some of our other great content, and we'll see you in the next one.